Well, good afternoon, friends, travelers, fellow participants, esteemed colleagues, friends, everyone. Can you hear me? I'm sorry, I got to get adjusted here. I need to make a quick correction. I'm not really going to focus specifically on dream yoga. I was going to focus on visions, perception, and reality. And dream yoga is certainly part of the aspect of visioning. So too, I'm not going to discuss visions from a prophetic access of information perspective. I'm going to keep it on a level of visual perception, both ordinary and entoptic. And my aim is, in this brief time, to take you through not words but images that will show to a certain extent how we process vision, develop perception to interpret reality. And so with that, I'll indicate ordinary vision. Obviously, light comes through our eyes, hits the retina, goes to the cortex, visual cortex, and turns into some image which are mentation processes, and we make a perception through that of what we perceive as reality. Entoptic visions are not ordinary. Entoptic visions are visions that arise internally. So in the practices of Dzogchen and Togyal, we talk about effulgent visions or self-arising visions. Well, entoptic visions are similar to this in some extent. I'm going to talk about three different types of form constants associated with entoptic visions. What might you see that would arise from internal as opposed to external stimuli? I'm then going to lay out a framework of three different means by which we can say how one takes these elemental forms and develops immersive visions out of them. And one of the speakers this morning was talking about how a neural network of AI can move off into some hallucinatory perspective. We're going to talk a little bit about how we can develop our own hallucinatory perspective of visions as well. Sorry, I keep going fast. I'm then going to talk about some case studies. I'm going to compare Christian visions of a Christian mystic and the visions of a West Chinese Dzogchen. I'm also going to look at the visions of Peruvian shamanic individuals in ayahuasca ceremony. And then we'll move on into vibratory aspects of how visions may relate to specific states of consciousness that we can actually identify. And then I'll move a little bit further into discussion of hallucinatory images and how some of these map to iconic mandalas that have been reported through the traditions, over the millennium. This slide demonstrates 4 entoptic form constants that were identified by Heinrich Kluver in groundbreaking research in 26 on hallucinogenic, specifically in this case, he was looking at mescaline from peyote. And his subjects reported seeing in their hallucinatory visioning description various forms, and he categorized 4 specific forms, the first being lattices, the second one being cobwebs, the third one being funnels or tunnels, and this one's an interesting one because in this instance, it's showing it's a striatia, like a center point and rays expanding from it. But it does give a depth perception as though you're going into the image. Whoops. The last one is spirals, and the one that has the striatia, it's also often considered to be equivalent to concentric circles. And I know in the traditions, there's discussions of the development of visions that represent as ripples in the water, as throwing a stone in the water, or a spiral, maybe a shield spinning on the tip of a spear. So there's some commonality there. This next set is interesting because where Kluver was looking at people who had these internally developed hallucinogenic visions from entheogens, this is the documentation of an ophthalmologist. So a female ophthalmologist had dreams, and when she was coming out of the dream and coming into awakening state, or what they call the hypnopompic state, she would have visions. They'd only last 30 seconds, maybe a minute and a half, but she was an ophthalmologist, and because of this, she's like, what's happening with my visionary field? And she documented this over a period of 46 years. And she discussed them as spiral waves. She saw the majority. She shows these instances. You see like 2A is a set of concentric circles, but the rest of them were predominantly the development of some type of image, which once she established the image in her mind's perception, often it would start to rotate. So she talked about spiral waves. Now, sorry, I got this on timer. It's going faster than I am. I'm going to have a hard time getting through this. Anyway, here we have the next group was Nicholson and Fernhaber. At the suggestion of an anthropologist by the name of Williams Lewis, who did a lot of work on entoptic visions, he suggested that artwork, rock art of prehistoric civilizations demonstrated some of this aspect of entoptic visions. And Nicholson and Fernhaber looked at, rock art 30,000 years in the past and this type of thing, and they did they did accumulate some kind of general description of imagery they saw from the prehistoric monoliths in Malta to other shamanistic art rock in caves. They would see spirals, concentric circles, sometimes aggregated, and also what they called an eye umbrella image, I guess. So anyway, these are just to give you an idea of what some type of reported entoptic self-arising visions may look like. All right, so the frameworks of this, this Lewis Williams, who was saying that, hey, look, I've looked at a lot of the historic art, and I'm thinking that maybe some of this has a hallucinatory aspect to it, that the cave art reflected shamans in elevated states, and they had these images. And he said the first thing that happens is the element comes to mind, and then the mind is trying to make sense of this element. So, it's like it's trying to put its overlay to try to bring the element into some kind of known perspective and reality that one is conditioned to. So that then is this exploratory process, and once one gets through the exploratory process and collects and overprints something onto that image, then one dives into that image and is immersed in the kind of like a hallucinogenic state of a visioning spirits, which he talked as stage 3. Ornstein was someone who was publishing in the 70s about the symmetry of the mental functioning of our brain. We're predominantly left brain. We're involved in thought a lot. The meditative practices you all perform works to develop a balance between that thinking brain and the perceptive brain. We move from operating out of thought to operating out of perception and awareness. Just naked awareness, unmanipulated, unprocessed, unmentated awareness. So that's the Ornstein's idea was the more you got your brain operating in resonance, the more you'd be able to see things clearly. And then seeing things clearly, we may be talking about going into elevated states of consciousness and seeing things perhaps in a way that we don't ordinarily see them. And then the last state, kind of building off Ornstein, but not focusing on a hemispheric perspective, but talking about the stability of the brain in a resonant state. And this says, you can achieve these states. There's a particular, not just frequency associated with it, but there's a integrated harmonic of everything that is happening throughout our mind body. And it need not be just in the brain, but people are studying. It's easy to, focus on the brain and try to measure aspects of activity of portions of the brain. But they see at these elevated states, they see a particular type of harmonic that's much more complicated than simple EEG frequency. So we'll talk about that a little bit. All right, so the first case I'm going to do is a comparison of Saint Hildegard of Bingen from the 12th century and Lama Fahe, a 20th century Qigong and Dzogchen master in Western China. And this is where I'm going to just let you not use your thought, but just your perception field. Look at the imagery and you identify how these individuals may have had elemental forms come to them, and then they elaborated it and they described their visions. This particular female saint described her visions, and then people who read her visions developed from her description these imageries. This she described as the universe. It's maybe concentric, but it's not circular, but it's an egg shape. And it's kind of interesting. Here, she talks of the Redeemer. It has multiple components. Obviously the concentric circles, some of the stars, perhaps some of the striation aspects in which an inverted tunnel. And it gets more complex as it goes. And then this was the completion of her series that I selected to compare to Lama Fahe's. And this is on a blue background, the Trinity, energetic concentric circles collapsing into an entity in the center of the image. Okay, now Lama Fahe, in addition to a Qigong master, which he used for cover to be able to enable him to continue to teach, he was a Dzogchen master. So here is his first series of images. He talked of the lamp of the empty spheres. I think that's pretty common with regards to the description of the Togol visions in their development. Again, a concentric circle pattern. Here is what he described as the lamp of the pure space. Again, concentric circles, but not, in this case, circular, but more oval or egg-shaped in nature. This he described as the visions of increased experience, and now you're beginning to see some of the circular, objects being populated, or the concentric circular imagery having objects inside of them, and then culminating in the image development in the Togol is the luminous spheres of the Buddha. All right. So here, just for quickly, we're going to go through the lamp of the empty spheres and comparing between the two traditions. And I think you can see we're seeing something similar. This is an imagery of Pablo Amaringo, a shaman or Icaro, someone who sang during the ceremonies of ingesting ayahuasca or DMT in the Amazon Orient. You'll see it's much more vivid in its nature to a certain extent. This kind of reflects the enhanced or the overwhelming visual stimulation of the cortex. So when the cortex is overstimulated, his imagery was much more vibrant, much more, dramatic, and it featured the circles and the spirals and that type of thing. Here we're going to do a quick thing that talks about Christian mystic, classic meditation manual of the 13th century in Belgium called the Rothschild Canticles. Here's a particular series of 5 images that actually start with a spiral in the forehead, concentric circles collapsing the imagery of the individual, and culminating in this last slide, the image of the Trinity. This is a cymatic or a resonance frequency of a water droplet stimulated at a particular frequency. And you can see the image that results. This is from the Marian group, and this is John Stuart Reed's work on the cymoscope. This is comparing John Stuart Reed's work on the cymoscope with that of the Rothschild canticles, a 13th century depiction of the Trinity being coalesced into a unitive pulsating energy. And at that, I'm sorry, I've got lots more to go, but it's the tip of the iceberg. An interesting thing I will note is these visions, according to the traditions and my own personal experience, the visions are signs of these elevated states of consciousness, and parallel to those visions also come things such as clairvoyance, CDs, and informational retrieval. So there's more to this topic, but I won't be able to discuss it today. Thank you so much for your attention.